Welcome to The Hunter and the Sphinx, Chapter 8. When we last left our story, they were just setting up their plans for how they're going to defend the meadow from Golga and his Vargal army. Since, well, it's nighttime here now, we don't get to wander around the forest today. It's entertainment by fish while the story goes on. So, as Morgana and Tian and the Hunter continue to plan their strategy and drink their delicious tea, Morgana gave a brief explanation of why they have all these magical creatures in the meadow with them. You see, this area around the tree functions as a bit of a junction point, so to speak, and a little bit of magical energy leaks through from the world it came from originally, and as such, every once in a while, something may come through from the other side or appear from who knows where, or one of the local creatures wanders and manages to wander into the meadow and changes over time. And who's to say how it all happens, but we have quite the collection of creatures. Everything from your lovely Sphinx here to something you could refer to as a harpy, to we have almost a lizard man that way, and all sorts of other varieties of fantastical creatures which are going to be providing you with backup in your efforts against the Golga and the Vargal. So, I think I would safely assume that you have brought plenty of firepower for this adventure there, Hunter. Indeed I have. I left the heaviest of the firearms up in the upstairs room that we were led to there with a good view out into the meadow. I'm going to pack some more portable ones with me when we head out, and I brought several explosives as well. Okay, that's good to know. Tian, you'll be in charge of coordinating with the other mystical creatures, since you have a link to them and you can actually keep up with what's going on around you. I want you and the Hunter to guard the main path and try to impede their progress as much as possible. We're going to have all of the other creatures fan out to either side of you and keep their forward scouts from flanking you and coming around behind, so you won't have to worry about anything to the rear as long as everyone does their job. But you'll just have what's in front of you, and hopefully we'll be able to thin their numbers before they reach the meadow. Okay. So, I think that is all of the advice or strategy I have for you. The rest is going to be up to you in the field. And with that, I think we should go and meet up at the entrance where the path comes towards is nearest to the meadow. And so Hunter and Tian went back to the room and grabbed all the things that they would be taking with them on their foray into the unknown. And as they walked, they came up with a strategy for how they can make best use of the supplies that they had. You know, I was thinking, Tian, that we could probably come up with a pretty sneaky little plan for how we could set up these explosives on them once the main army reaches certain points. Oh, and what is that, Mr. Hunter? I was thinking you can control small creatures with your sphinxy gaze. Can't you? Yes? But of course. Could you, by chance, control more than one at once if it was... well, actually, you can give instructions, can't you? Right? Indeed, I can. So, if we were to time things right and set this up right, I could set small bundles of explosives in branches, above, low-hanging branches above parts of the path where they'll be walking under, and you could potentially have a small creature through what's holding them in place and have them fall down into the midst of our approaching enemy. Could we not? I'm thinking I might be able to make that work. So it might not be perfectly timed, but we should be able to cause some damage that way. Okay. That sounds good. We're going to have to make sure we are clear of any enemies while we're setting them up, though. Otherwise, we're going to get sniped by somebody. That would not be any good. As they continue to plan their plot for thinning the ranks of the Vargol, they met up with the other fantastical creatures that were going to be aiding them, divided up into groups, and set out through creatures through the forest, and Hunter and the Sphinx down the path, keeping to the edge of the tree line, starting to make their way towards the approaching army. Guess it's going to be hard to see when we're going to actually run into the first scouts of them, isn't it? Indeed. We're going to have to be quiet from here on out. Slowly, carefully creeping their way through the Sphinx, keeping in contact with her fellow creatures as they slowly swept their way through the forest, trying to keep a closest parallel line as possible as they moved along, watching for Vargol scouts. And some ways down the path, they hadn't run into any yet, but they did find a good place to set up one of the explosive devices. What I wouldn't give to have some landmines right about now, the place for those guys. Too bad all I have is these explosives that have a movement sensor, so when they start to drop, they should explode in midair and cause some pretty impressive midair explosions right about head level if we're lucky. Carefully, the Hunter and Sphinx set up their trap. The Sphinx managed to capture 2 creatures, which were put into a sack to save for when it was time to release them, once they had an idea where and when the main enemy forces would be passing by that area. Poor creatures, stuck in a sack. No fun for them. As they continued on, Sphinx suddenly stopped and cocked her head to the left. Oh, first contact has been made on the left flank. No shaman, just a lone Vargol must be their lead element. He has been eliminated, not to worry. Okay, looks like things are about to start happening. Let's go really slowly and carefully along this next path. And sure enough, not too many minutes down the road, they caught sight of something that was not a deer. Definitely didn't move like a deer. Creeping along towards them in a general direction. Mr. Hunter, I see your quarry. Sure enough. All right. I have my sights. And with one suppressed shot, the first Vargle was vanquished. Nice shot, Mr. Hunter. I would say that went right between the eyes. That's what I got out of that, too. Scope looked really good to that scope. All right. One down. Only, what, 9,999 to go or something? Who's to say? Let's be optimistic. Sure. Only 9,998. You know, it couldn't be any more than that, right? Maybe? You're so helpful, Sphinx. I tried my best. Carefully they crept along. And they reached another spot where a branch provided an optimal location to leave an explosive present for their uninvited guests. Okay. That's 2 explosives, and I don't really have anything else to use for that, and well, we only got 2 creatures in our bag, so that will have to do for now. Let's keep going. Carefully creeping forward. The comrades began to encounter more Vargle creeping through the woods. Pretty soon they could hear, not just with Sphinxy telepathic abilities, but with their own ears, the sounds of fighting to their left and right. They managed to snipe a couple more solo Vargle on the way. Oh, we're starting to take some losses on our flanks there, Hunter. And we have enough to keep the line steady, but we've had a few go back with injuries. And eventually we're not going to be able to keep this up for too much longer. Alrighty, well, let's see how close we can get to their main units before we have to pull back. Carefully creeping along. Took out some more. Pretty soon there was sound of major skirmishes on either side. Oh boy. Here it comes. They took out a group of 3 in quick succession. And then, just over the rise of a hill, they could see a large group coming over a not too distant hill. There's a small dip in the ground between them. Not big enough to call a valley, but there's a small dip in the ground and a few hundred meters. So, alright, I think this is a good place. We could set up a sniping spot. You watch for anybody that comes in the side. I'm going to let them know we're here, and I'm going to open up on them. Okay, Mr. Hunter. I'll be your eyes and watch your back. Here we go. And with that, all silencers discarded, the Hunter opened up with his plasma rifle and began to inflict some heavy damage on the lead elements of the Vargle forces. Well, Vargle weren't idiots, and they didn't want to keep coming over that little rise into heavy plasma rifle fire, so they paused and sent word back to Golga, who was a ways back in the middle of his army, triumphantly marching. And since the Vargol don't speak basic. We'll just translate what they're saying to Golga into basic for you, so you can understand. As Golga's walking with full confidence and swagger in the midst of his massive army that he'd created, a report came to him. Supreme Commander, report from the front. Oh, what is it? We have encountered a human with heavy long-range attack that is causing our forces in the front to pause and be rather hesitant to go over the hill. The front fools. Can't they deal with one measly human? Well, Commander, he's it's not just one human. There's other creatures out there that are engaging our scout forces, and we can't get around behind him. And he's at a advantageous spot where we can't launch anything from we don't have anything with long enough range to hit him. Ugh, must I do everything myself? And with that, Golga used his magical stone to teleport himself close to the front lines. He approached the hill just enough to get a little peek over. He could see where the hunter had set up and was taking opportunistic shots at anything that came up over the hill. One puny human. Soon he will see how futile his efforts are. And with that, Golga strode confidently to the top of the hill and began to weave a magic spell. Hunter, of course, saw him approach and began to pour fire into him. However, Golga, well, he's no pushover. And he's got some pretty stout magic and defensive abilities. All of the hunter's shots ran into his magical shield and didn't do anything. Sphinx, I think that's that Golga guy. I haven't seen anybody else around here with 4 arms. Oh. Sure enough, the Sphinx hair on the back of her neck began to stand up. Hunter, we need to get away from here now. She grabbed him by the back of his neck and literally threw him backwards away from the crest of the hill. And she leaped after him as a crackling, sizzling fire, the energy bolt sizzled over their heads where they'd just been a moment ago. And that's why we were told not to engage him. Okay. Retreat! Time to go. And with that, Hunter and the Sphinx ran lickety-split back the way they came. Laughed Golga. That'll teach them. Sheesh, puny humans. Whatever that other thing was. They have no hope of stopping my armies. All troops, continue the march. Don't let the one measly human interfere with you again, or it'll be your heads that'll be incinerated next. And with that, the troops began to march onwards again. Well, the hunter and the Sphinx retreated fair ways away, but since now they knew where the army was and about how fast they would be coming, the Sphinx gave instructions to her 2 tiny captives that were in the bag and sent them on their way, one after the other, timing it right. So sure enough, as the first groups of the lead units of the Vargol had gone past the first set up, well, it was the second one they set up, but the first one they came to, the trap, the little creature chewed through the restraining device, and sure enough, the explosives fell and detonated in the midst of the Vargol. Well, they weren't too happy about that. They took a couple hundred casualties from that one. The Sphinx chuckled to herself. I bet they loved that. Let us go back to the meadow now. Things are a little too dangerous with Golga lurking near the front of their ranks. And not too long later, they heard the second explosion as their second trap was detonated. Ooh, I hope that one got some more. Pretty soon, they arrived back at the meadow to find a triage hospital that's set up in the bottom, inside the bottom level of the tree. And all the wounded were being taken care of. They ran into Morgana, who was helping treat some of the wounded. She said, "Won't be too long before they arrive at the meadow now. You should get to your upper chamber there and set up what your defenses you have there prepared for them up there. And I'll send the Sphinx a cue when they've reached the barrier." Alrighty, here's hoping. This is going to be tough. And with that, we conclude chapter